Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for everyone who tuned in to yesterday's live stream of RocketLab's Investor Day and Neutron event. I know we were all a little disappointed that RocketLab had problems with the webcast and we weren't able to actually watch the presentation live, but we did go through the PDF of what was being presented and discuss all that in detail. And it was really just great hanging out with you guys, talking, answering questions, and talking about RocketLab. It's why I got into YouTube in the first place, is just to meet new people, talk about investing, and cool companies like RocketLab. So it was a great time. As I said yesterday, it's really the chat that makes a live stream, I think, and you guys were amazing in terms of just the interaction and back and forth. If we didn't have you guys talking to me, it would have been a pretty boring stream, but we really made the best of it, even though there was no live presentation to watch. So I definitely plan on doing another live stream again in the future, perhaps for the first, well, hopefully, fingers crossed, successful catch of an Electron. The next time we hear they're going to attempt a catch, I definitely want to live stream that. And we'll just see going forward. I'd like to do more live stream events, but we'll see. With that out of the way, today I just wanted to talk about, obviously, the big presentation that we missed. The RocketLab has now dropped the full video of the presentation and the Q&A on their website. So if you want to watch the full thing, go check it out there. I'll be sure to share a link in the description below. What I'm going to do today is, because it's so long, it's 2+ hours, and I don't think we can really go over all of it in one YouTube video. I'm just going to focus on the Q&A at the end, because we already, yesterday, if you watched the stream, read through all the stuff they were presenting. So we may not get a lot of the details they talked about in person, but we probably already have a good idea of what they were sharing with the audience. But the Q&A, I mean, who knows what they're talking about there? They could reveal a lot of interesting new details, a lot of interesting tidbits. So that's what I really want to cover first of all. I'm going to go through and watch it with you, and I'll just kind of pause to give my own commentary as usual if I find anything particularly interesting or something I want to expand on or discuss further. I'll just quickly pause what they're talking about and chime in, and we can, in this kind of way, it's almost like we're watching together. Not as good as a real live stream, but it's, I think, the next best thing. Also, I did just want to comment briefly on the stock, because we've had a really big move today, and I know that may catch some people off guard. I'm actually not that shocked. A lot of the time with these big events, you kind of get to buy the rumor and like a stock rise leading up to it, and then a sell the news and like a bit of a sell-off afterwards. Combine that with a bit of a down day in the markets and some other growth stocks, maybe like pre-profit type stocks, also having big drops today, so RocketLab is probably being dragged down by that. Looking at, say, Airbnb is another one that I'd kind of throw in a similar basket to RocketLab that similar investors are interested in, and that one's down 8+% today. So even though RocketLab's having a rough day, not all doom and gloom and not all their fault, in my opinion anyway. Anyway, I did take this opportunity to add a few more shares today. I've been kind of adding steadily, so I bought 250 more shares with the free cash I had on hand, and I do hope to continue to add as I look toward reaching that 10,000 share goal that I've mentioned previously, hoping to get there in relatively short order. So before we dive into that, please hit like and subscribe down below if you haven't before. We also have a link to the Discord server down there, and my Twitter handle is down in the description below. By the way, I am planning to do a free merch giveaway, probably within the next 2 videos. I'll get a raffle set up for that. So stay tuned and come back next time if you're interested in potentially winning a free RocketLab shirt or some other merch. Should be pretty fun. Anyway, with that out of the way, let's jump into yesterday's Q&A with RocketLab's management team. All right, guys, we're now going ahead and jumping into the Q&A. Let's hear what RocketLab's management has to say.
Thank you so much, Adam and everybody else. So that concludes the formal part of our presentations for today. Now, I know we've kept you seated for a very long time, so we won't spend much more time on Q&A, but do want to give you the opportunity to ask some questions. If you'd like to ask them in this format, please go ahead, just raise your hand, give your name and where you're from, and we'll bring a mic to you. If you don't want to ask questions in that format...
I'll let you get settled in. Well, thanks, everybody, for the wonderful presentations today. Suji De Silva of Roth Capital.
As you can see, by the way, sorry, that's just a model of the Archimedes engine beside them there. I think for scale, you can see how large it is. It's going to be the engine on the new Neutron. It looks pretty interesting. I definitely want to look more into engines in the future. Compare this one to some other engines, maybe.
You talked about going from 1 to 2 launches, 1 to 2 rockets, and then 24 launches per year. That seems like from your side, you can get there. I'm curious from the customer's side. There's a lot of kind of inward and outward movement of customer launches, push out, so forth. How mature is the customer process coming to you where you think you can get there? It's evolved, obviously, from the beginning when it was, one prototype rock satellite at a time. So I'm curious how that's evolving.
Yeah, I would say that I can't think of a time where a customer has waited for a rocket. Generally, we've always got the rocket ready, and the biggest challenge that we have is we call it manifest whack-a-mole, where one customer is we think it's ready, but they delay, and then you can't get back that month or that launch window. So we're always continually trying to sift through it. What we have seen is that the quality of the customer really increased to where most of the deals we do now are bulk buys, which we really like. They're not ones and twosies. A customer will go and fly on a ride share, do a tech demo, and then to actually put their constellation in an orbit that can be commercial, they'll come to a dedicated platform where we can place their assets in the exact orbit that we like to see. So I would say that the market needs to continue to grow. I mean, small launch, the space industry is a relatively nascent industry, but the thing that drives our launch cadence right now the most is actually customers turning up on time rather than anything else. And we're getting better at that. I mean, if you're providing a dedicated service, you don't want to ever be in a position where you turn around to your customer and say, "Oh, sorry, we're launching this person now," or "We screwed that up." So we're getting more aggressive, and we know which kinds of customers often delay and which ones are always on time. And we in some cases we'll have 2 customers at the launch site integrating at the same time. We've got multiple clean rooms there to enable that. And if this customer turns up early, but we've actually moved them leapfrogged in some occasions this year. But that probably continues to be our biggest challenge is just like that manifest whack-a-mole.
Great, thanks. And maybe it's
just pausing there. It's a question I've had myself many times thought about. I definitely would be more comfortable if their problem was scaling up production of these rockets and they had customers ready with payloads begging them to launch, and the problem was their production of the rockets. But that's not the case. It's the opposite. So we have rockets ready to go and we're waiting for customers to be ready. And it's a little bit more of an uncomfortable place for me, because now we're wondering, okay, when are we going to have customer readiness to support 24 launches a year, which is what he was asking. And you can see Peter, addressed it. We didn't get an exact answer. I mean, you can never know for sure when customers will be ready and able to support that cadence. So I guess it's hard to give a firm answer on that question. I can see how part of the problem would be, okay, you've blocked off launching this week for this customer, and then all of a sudden they're not ready. Well, that week's gone now, so no one else is ready to launch that week, and these things can definitely be problems, and they're definitely getting better at dealing with it. I just hope we see the demand and the customers there to support 24 to 36 in the long run Electron launches per year. It's kind of the goal to get extremely profitable. 24 to be profitable, 36 is like looking really good, especially if you think about adding in reusability.
Separate question on Globalstar and MDA real quick. You had a bunch of bullets up there, which are very impressive reasons you won that contract, but at the bottom, as you went past quickly, it said something about a platform for additional communication services. I'm curious what you might have meant by that language? Was that just thrown in there, or was that really that this could be the beginning of multiple customer engagements like that?
Yeah, obviously, I mean, I should, you guys talk about it, but I mean, obviously we're building a very unique capability there. So this is a platform that lives in a horrible environment. It's got a 12-year lifespan, really, really operational. So that can be used for a bunch of things. So maybe you guys want to...
Yeah, I mean, I can illuminate a little bit. You know, from an engineering perspective, these platforms, the physics really drives kind of what needs to happen. So for a persistent communications platform, you need that longer lifespan, right, in the environment. You need a lot of power to drive consistent and constant communications. You also will need block redundancy in order for you to, in case there's an error on some of the systems, be able to switch over to a redundant system to not have any gaps in the operational traffic that's required for those businesses. So from an engineering perspective, that's really driving what we mean by platform that can be used for future communications applications. In addition, there are also the makeup of the spacecraft also allows us to scale it such that, you know, either with a number of spacecraft, different types of frequencies, different types of antennas, and be able to kind of play with that in order to maybe not the same type of communications applications, but something slightly different.
And I just add on the demand side, I mean, we see a lot of, you know, when we announced that, we had a lot of customers come to us and say, what can you do for us? And that's both on the, you know, national security, civil space, and commercial front. So yeah, a lot of demand for this capability in its class, and so really excited to see what we can do with it.
Yeah, and it's not to say that someday we're not going to, you know, own quite a few of these type of spacecraft in orbit and offer satellite as a service. I mean, that's ultimately the dream for us, right? Where we want to move from kind of event-driven, you know, revenue to like launches and shipping a satellite to somebody else. You know, we think we're a very natural owner of space assets.
Sorry, guys, I'm just going to pause it before he dives into further the more application side of things, which it sounds like where he's going to talk about this Mda contract with Globalstar. I've said it many times, or this is kind of a big deal. It's their first time manufacturing these really large satellites as opposed to the smaller ones, and it's a huge contract for 17 satellites with Globalstar. It's a great sign of things to come, because once they have the ability to build this type of satellite, they're definitely going to continue doing that in the future. It's not just going to be a one-off, so they're kind of moving into a new class of hardware here, which is nice to see how it opens up new markets and new capabilities. And clearly these satellites could launch on the Neutron as well.
And you can either go after and try to find out what the next great gold mine is, or you can find people that already have a gold mine and help them mine it more efficiently, right? And so with better infrastructure. And so we're kind of more leaning towards like that at this point, because we can do that today, right? And these kind of projects allow us to have more confidence in the fact that, you know, we could build the best infrastructure out there. We could support it. You know, having that launch and having the design and all the key supply chain components. I mean, it allows us to do everything. And that's really, some people look at a deal like this Globalstar contract and say, well, is this kind of really what your model is just to build spacecraft for other people? It's like, well, that's part of the business. It is, but the longer term vision is much broader than that.
Yeah, we've heard a lot of this before from Adam. I don't know if you've checked out my recent video on presentation he made, but he goes into this in a lot of detail. Just super curious what the first satellites are that are going to be owned and operated by RocketLab in orbit. We don't know yet. We know it's going to happen, but I'm just really curious how that model is going to look like. We know it'll bring in recurring revenue and it'll be very profitable, but still too early to have firm details on that yet.
Thanks for taking the questions, and nice job on the presentation, and there's certainly a lot of progress you guys have made since the DSPAC. It's Eric Rasmussen, Stifel. Just on the Neutron update, you obviously have a number of key milestones that you put on that one slide, and it's a pretty aggressive time frame to get there. And it looked like you were still maintaining the target of, I believe it was two launches, one test, and then obviously one would be a a paying customer in 2024. But of the things that you put on there, the key milestones, the Archimedes, it was a design change. LC3 is a big undertaking in terms of the infrastructure build out. Where would you see sort of, if you were to say the top 2 or 3, where you really sort of feel like most of the effort's going to go into to meet that time frame?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start, Sean, you can jump in. But I mean, the majority of the effort is actually in like stuffing the turkey. Like those key pieces of infrastructure are the bits that take the most amount of time, and they're the least visible, and the most amount of, you put tremendous amount of work and you really can't see much for it. Obviously, when you roll tanks out, it's super obvious. Engine's always a long pole in the tent, but the Stennis announcement we made today really shortcuts a huge amount of time for us. Like if you had to go and build all of that engine test infrastructure, that's a big deal. And those deals don't come together in a week. That's something we've been working for a very long time. Just like the launch site. I mean, that doesn't happen in a week. Like we've been working with Virginia for more than a year to secure that land and those facilities. Where Sean showed where we're building the factory was like a year ago. It was a giant chicken farm, and there was just chicken wings coming out of there flat out. Now it's a rocket factory. So those kind of long poles. The bit that keeps me up at night is not so much are we going to have avionics finished in time. It's just like the general supply chain is just tough. Like buying CNC machines and concrete and stuff like that. You should talk to that. And
yeah. I think the state of supply chain is definitely interesting now, and we're hedging our bets. We're pushing all parts in parallel. And I think one thing I'll tack on to what Pete was saying before too is it's not a game of developing a launch vehicle with a lot of serial things. So we don't wait for the engine to be done then to start something else. We're pushing all parts in parallel, and it's largely because we have the teams already stood up. So we're not looking to build teams from scratch in many areas. We're certainly hiring a lot and growing our talent base in each one of these areas, but it's definitely not a serial development too. So where we can, we're pushing Launch Complex 3 as fast as we can, the engine test out as fast as we can so that the engine gets brought online. The fluid systems, the tanks are all being built by a separate team, fully focused as well. And I think the other thing I should say is we're playing our diversity of our operations across multiple talent areas to our advantage. So we've got teams in New Zealand working, teams on the East Coast and West Coast also working, different parts of the project. So it's a number of parallel parts, but that's the way we've postured ourselves to get to 2024 to get some hardware on the pad.
So I'll just throw my 2 cents in there in terms of the timeline of Neutron launching. If they do actually launch a customer's payload in 2024, I'll be extremely impressed. Rocket development is very hard and is almost always delayed. Look at things like Blue Origin's New Glenn, we originally thought was going to be launching a while ago. Still haven't really seen too much of it. I know they're very secretive, but it's definitely not launching. SpaceX's Starship, we expected to have an orbital test. Well, originally they were thinking they'd have one ages ago. Now we're shooting for November on that, but these things keep getting pushed back. Vulcan as well. Basically, every rocket I can think about has had many delays to the initial timeline. I mean, don't even get me going on SLS, because now we're talking decades here. But they're still sticking to the current timeline of 2024, 2 launches, 1 test, and 1 customer. If they can stick to that, that'll be extremely impressive.
Yeah, and to be clear, like the image that Sean showed of the launch site is that's in its like finished, complete state. Like, tap the last little piece down and call it done. We'll be coming to market with a much more simplified site than that. And just as we did with Electron, we incrementally brought the vehicle to market quickly. We demonstrated capability, and then slightly later we added another launch pad. Slightly later, we added other facilities and other manufacturing. So don't expect to see what you saw on that slide on launch day 1.
Thanks. Hi, Austin Moeller with Canaccord Genuity. I think recently, Peter, we had a conversation where you had discussed the transition of a lot of these aspirational constellation companies from they start out with maybe a 3U or a 6U CubeSat bus, and then they want to sort of go upstream to a larger, more capable platform, in the 300 to 600 kilogram range. Can you touch a little bit on how this benefits the Photon side of the business?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I think that's incredibly correct. And typically, we see a lot of technology demonstrators in small platforms and in larger platforms before someone graduates on and goes and builds a big constellation. Sometimes these constellations can be like a black sky, which is sort of a dozen, which naturally flows onto an Electron. And then, these larger constellations will flow directly onto a Neutron. So no, we absolutely see that as consistent across the board. And the really nice thing is that, we've worked with those companies when they were still, building CubeSats, and especially with, some of the companies we acquired, they provided the reaction wheels or the software. So these are really, really long relationships. And the great thing about a long relationship, if you deliver, then you become a very trusted partner, through the whole ecosystem. So, we still see that today.
Awesome. And then just a question on the launch side of the business. I assume you guys are going to go after National Security Space Launch Phase 3?
Yeah, we certainly...
By the way, guys, just unfortunately we can't have the real back and forth that we could have with the live stream because of those technical problems RocketLab had with the stream. But please do anything you're thinking about their presentations or what they're saying, let me know down in the comments. I'm definitely going to respond. I'd love to have the conversations about it, the back and forth. A lot of people, even in the Discord, know a ton about rockets, some even more than me. It's really impressive, really. And I just love having these conversations. So yeah, let me know what you think about any of these answers down below.
We're interested to see how that's shaping up. We've obviously been working with that customer and given our thoughts of how we think NSSLP Phase 3 should look. And we're watching to see what ultimately occurs there. But it's pretty hard to get a better validation of a customer's belief in your product than them helping you develop it. So I think that's a good sign.
Great, thank you.
Just referring to the U.S. government offering RocketLab some grant money to help develop the Neutron. Can't remember off the top of my head. It was either 20 or 40 million, I believe. I'd have to double check, but yeah, that's what he's referring to there.
Hi, Nathan from Launch Window Research.
Launch Window Research. Shout out to him on YouTube, by the way. Like, unbelievable he's there and he got a question in. Wow. Very impressive. I'm jealous.
Is RocketLab looking into building a Photon-like spacecraft for Neutron or a modified second stage capable of secondary missions?
Yeah, so with that, I presume you're talking about the Photon Lunar. We're really rubbish at naming stuff in some respects. So the Photon Lunar, yes. So one of the nice things about that platform is it is scalable. So it's been a very successful platform for us, not just the Curie engine on the kick stage, but also into the Lunar Photon. So yeah, for geo missions and deep space missions. Absolutely. Now, Neutron is a standard kind of product, doesn't require a kick stage. We've been able to optimize with engine cycles and whatnot, not needing a kick stage. But certainly for a third stage or an interplanetary cruise stage, these are all well within our wheelhouse of capabilities.
It's probably worth noting also that we in the space systems area for customers that come to us with a problem, we look at how to combine the two and optimize. And so when you don't have to manage across a customer interface, you can design the space vehicles to match up and improve the unit economics. So we're absolutely going to be leveraging that.
Thank you.
Spencer Britsky from Callan. How should we think about cash burn for the next few quarters in 2023?
Yeah, I'll pass it over to you, Adam. A bit of handle on that.
Yeah. So I mean, we are really very much in the throat of the investment cycle on Neutron. So again, whole reason why we came public in the way that we did was to raise enough cash to make sure that we could fully invest in that. So that's really going to be the cash flow consumer for the next, at least the next 6 quarters. I think our turning cash flow positive. We've talked about exiting 2023 cash flow positive. That's really going to continue to be dependent upon where we are in that investment cycle for Neutron. We're still very comfortable with the envelope of spending that we originally talked about, the amount of cash to develop Neutron. The timing is always one that's kind of a little bit more difficult to predict. But the rest of our business is not consuming cash, right? It's really it's all Neutron at this point. And we've made a tremendous amount of progress despite the fact that we couldn't turn on resources as soon as we'd like to for Neutron because of Capstone, which was an all-encompassing mission to do this mission to the moon. So it's again just the way we kind of cobble together resources and do things as frugally as we can. But again, I think the cash flow, I would say, profile is really going to be all Neutron, with offsets, from our other business, including Electron and the rest of Space Systems.
That's pretty interesting. I will say it's kind of comforting to hear that the rest of the business minus Neutron is not really burning cash at this point. So let's say they, worst case scenario, just had to cancel the Neutron program. There's still a pretty decent business here with just Electron and space applications and space systems. But it's a little deceiving because currently, at least, he says the rest of the business isn't burning cash. Electron is not yet profitable with the current launch cadence. They need more launches in order to break even. But I suppose the other side of the business is making up for that, so they're sort of breaking even is, I guess, how he looks at it. But yeah, comforting to hear that because I was still thinking personally that the business as a whole, even minus Neutron development, was burning a little bit of capital at this point. And obviously Neutron is well worth the investment, by the way.
Hello, Mariana Perez Mora at Bank of America. As a follow-up to this cash flow question, how do you think about free cash flow conversion whenever you are at this 2024, 2025 volume where you double Electron launches, where you have SolAero already at target multiples, and where you have already launched Neutron?
Sorry, I missed the beginning of the question. It was hard to hear.
Sorry, free cash flow conversion. Free cash flow conversion?
Yeah, so I mean, the one advantage that we've had, particularly on the launch side of our business, is the fact that we get paid against milestones. So we recognize revenue when we launch a rocket, but we collect cash all along the way. And typically, we've collected about 60% of the value of a mission by the time we actually start to build the rocket. So I think we have a very virtuous, cash flow and cash generation cycle from that perspective. But again, once Electron is kind of again at its, the target of 24 per month, and we're past the meat of the investment curve on Neutron, I think we'll start to deliver pretty sporty cash flow.
So what does he mean by that? Pretty sporty cash flow. Let me know if you have any theories down in the comments below.
But again, I think timing is really kind of what's in question. Whether kind of that really turns the corner in whether that's mid 2024 or 2025. I think as Pete mentioned, we talk about the investments in Neutron. We'll come up with our first minimum viable product that will launch so we can get some heritage and also get some revenue generation coming. But we're going to be investing in Neutron and the whole facilities around that, for probably the next, at least the next 3 to 4 years. So again, it's all about the timing and kind of when that kind of starts to taper off and how that dovetails with hitting 24 launches on Electron where it's at our model, and then continue to grow the other parts of our business, particularly some of the space systems projects and portfolio solutions. I don't know if that answers your question.
Hi, Jonathan Safer from the Harlem Launch Alliance. Could you talk more about the reason for your switch from 7 engines to 9 on Neutron, and also how that might affect engine out capabilities?
Yeah, that's interesting.
Sure. So a rocket is a giant engineering trade, and we only want to build one engine. 2 engines is kind of an optimized scenario, but the reality is that it's double the amount of development program. So the engine that sizes the whole problem case, if you will, is actually the upper stage engine. And the problem space that really defines that is maximum G loading for like a geostationary mission, where you have a relatively light payload and you're going fast, so you're high energy. So that basically sets the thrust level that you need to meet without exceeding the G load. Once that kind of bounding case is set, then you've got a couple of options. Either you have a big engine that you throttle way down, and the trouble is you start losing ISP on that upper stage, which is not what you want, or you shrink that engine down. Now, it's a happy coincidence that the upper stage engine is also pretty much matches exactly the thrust requirements for the landing engine. So it wasn't like it was one bounded case. Those two sort of binding cases drove the particular thrust class. So with those two cases bound, then to meet the performance requirements on stage one, then you just have to add more engines. So it's really an optimization thread that you need to run to minimize the development timeline by not having multiple engine development programs against particular mission profiles.
It's pretty interesting, kind of a little peek in a window into how a rocket engineer thinks about designing a rocket.
Hi, I'm Thomas from Gilder. Long term, I think you guys outlined about a 25% EBITDA margin with efficiencies from Electron, shrinking like the total, or like doubling the volume, increasing Solero margins. And I think that just speaks to your incredible execution, your ability to like vertically integrate all of these different parts of your business. But, since you're dancing with elephants, competing with SpaceX and others, you have to continuously build newer rocket models like Neutron. And you funnel all the cash flow and all the savings you get from all these production efficiencies from Electron into developing Neutron. And when Neutron gets built, it's the same process is going to get better as you get better at making the production efficiencies with Neutron. But then it's going to be 2025, 2026, and there's going to be another new thing to do in space. And you're going to have to continuously build another rocket model. And I'm just curious about how you guys think about returning cash to shareholders versus continuously funneling it into capital expenditures, and whether you see a target percentage of CapEx as a percentage of revenue long term.
I'll do part of it. Yeah. So I'm not sure that you need to continually develop rockets. I don't think a continual evolution assumption is correct. Building rockets is not. It's a big deal. Like you don't want to. It's great to get to do it twice. I think if you ask me, I don't want to do it third time. It's nah, I'm out. So what we're trying to build here is a platform that if we project forward and we look forward and we talk to all the customers, it's a platform that we see to be very enduring in time. Yep, there might be other platforms that other companies develop for going to other destinations and doing other things, but this kind of class of launch vehicle has existed since the beginning of time with Soyuz, and I don't see any time soon that it's going to get phased out. So I'm not sure we continually need to chase rocket development. I think what we've proven that we're good at is finding a target market and executing on that target market and being able to be best in class in that target market. And we're always going to develop stuff. We're not going to stand still in any way, but we only ever do stuff not because we have like Pete's got an internal passion to go and do something because they want to do something. It's like everything is a business-based decision. And the one thing I would say about RocketLab versus some of the other space companies out there, it's like this is not a passion project. This is a business, and all the decisions that we make are around like exactly to your point. How do we return value to the shareholders, to the company, and how do we have an impact to humanity? That's the whole point of it. So maybe Adam, you can ask the more financial elements.
I think that was the most interesting answer we've gotten to a question today, or maybe in the last year or so from Peter. So yeah, really interesting to hear. They don't have any plans to build a heavy or super heavy lift launch vehicle in the future. Seems like they're going to stick with the small and medium lift launchers. And they're not really looking to go head to head with Starship in the super heavy lift space. The other question he somewhat addressed, is never really been discussed in detail, is how Neutron will perform if Starship is operating in the market. And it sounds like Peter thinks, while Starship is super heavy, we're talking 100 tons to orbit, but the medium lift space of 10 to 15 ton vehicle, maybe 10 to 20 ton, has been in existence basically forever, and he thinks it will continue to be in existence even with Starship operating, which can make sense. Perhaps you don't need a Starship launch with a massive skyscraper-size rocket for a smaller satellite, although it depends on costs more than anything. So we'll wait and see on that.
No, I think Pete hit on the fact that we don't constantly plan on iterating a new launch vehicle every 3 to 5 years. I mean, that's not the model. The model is to use our capabilities and the launch vehicles we have to actually create almost like recurring revenue streams on orbit. Like, again, our whole plan here is not to build satellites just strictly for other people. We want to be generating a cash flow machine from assets that we own up on orbit eventually, and how we apply those into what applications, or whether we're supporting customer applications versus our own, that's different. So I think that again, our model does not revolve around the next big rocket. As far as what we've modeled, as far as investment in CapEx every year, we kind of taken the more traditional aerospace model of once you're kind of stabilized around 4% of revenue each year into CapEx.
Okay, we've got time for probably 2 more questions today before we need to wrap up. So I know we've kept you long enough. I think we've got just one question there, Michael. Yep.
Adam Stetner, Special Situations Funds. Quick question on the Rutherford. How many life launches do you expect its lifespan to be?
For the Rutherford engine or the vehicle?
I guess reused Electron, but I was...
Reused Electron, yeah. Look, it's an iterative process. It's probably too early to give you a hard and fast number. What we can say from the testing we've done and the hardware that's been returned, it's really in good shape. So I don't want to. The moment I give a number, then that's going to be the number. Is going to be this is the number. For example, one of the elements in the vehicle that is the most kind of perishable, if you will, is the batteries. And we've just finished up a big battery program that enables those batteries to be reflown at least 10 times. Prior to that, it was a one-shot wonder. Like those batteries, we draw down 1 megawatt in 160 seconds. The batteries turn themselves inside out, and we're done. We're on orbit. But we've really spent a lot of time on those batteries now that we know that we can do those at least 10 of those big discharges before we need to go and touch them. And that the battery represents quite a significant part of the refurbishment. So certain things will have really long lifetimes, like a vent relief valve could go 100 times. Batteries can go 10. Structures, it's too early to say. At least on a propulsion system, 20 hot fires on a Rutherford is pretty blasé. So different aspects of the vehicle will have different lives.
And
good to hear on that. We're looking at least, I would say, 10 launches per Electron before we have any major refurbishment, and that would just be the battery, which is a major component, but that had been shared previously that they were up to being able to use a battery 10 times, and that still appears to be the case, and the engine's in really good shape, 20 plus hot fires, so not much worries in that front. I do believe a battery could be replaced, so you could potentially be looking at more than that for launch, but they'll have to get more data on how good the vehicle is looking after multiple times flying and being caught.
And one quick follow-up on your Archimedes. Given that it's oxygen rich, do you have to use? Can you use off-the-shelf materials in your?
Yes.
You can, so you don't have to develop a new metal.
No, there's no material science in there at all.
Because you're running it cool.
It's cold.
Yeah.
It's cold. Yeah. No, we're not even doing any contortion in there whatsoever.
No hydrogen.
Right. Yeah.
Hey, Colin Canfield, Barclays. So if you could just maybe discuss and quantify the pricing trends that you're assuming in your long-term margin targets, and then kind of talk about how you balance that versus a persistent cost inflation environment. Thanks.
Yeah, I guess I'll say on the pricing trends assumed in our model. So we've actually been seeing increased pricing on our vehicle. When we first started back in 2017 with our first initial flights, we were pricing the vehicle a little under $5 million, about $4.9 million. and now our average, kind of off-the-shelf price is for a standard mission is 7.5. So in our model, we actually assume about 2.5% increase per year in the selling price for standard launch. Now, inflation certainly has been running higher than that recently, but at the same time, the synergies that we're realizing and the learning benefits, the learning curve that we're riding in producing the vehicle, and then the increased cadence to absorb those overhead costs we anticipate to be enough so that we're not really kind of worried so much about fighting pure inflation in our pricing model and our cost model. But that's.
So that was pretty interesting. I did a previous video where I dove into the numbers on a spreadsheet in terms of looking at the revenue from Electron, how much they would make if it was reused versus if it was not reused, and how the margins would look. And of course, in that spreadsheet, I was putting in a number of how much I think the price per launch will increase per year. I don't remember what my model was off the top of my head. It was probably in the same ballpark, may have been a little bit higher, but now we have that 2.5% number we can plug in there, which is pretty modest, to be honest. I feel like they could potentially raise prices even further. There hasn't been a ton of competition in the small launcher space, if you think about it. Astra's had their troubles. Virgin Orbit's still kind of getting going. Firefly's still kind of getting going. They're having trouble with their first launch. Same with Relativity. So perhaps the competition is coming, but it's not here yet, and it seems to keep getting delayed. That was the final question, so let's wrap up the discussion. Thanks for watching that Q&A with me, guys. I found it extremely interesting. There's a lot of new stuff to go over there. I've got to sift through the details, plug new numbers into my models, think about how this changes things for the future of the company. Overall, I think it's still pretty positive. No huge surprises this investor day. I think everything they talked about was kind of expected for me. There was no big one more thing where like, oh, by the way, we've got this secret product that we're going to reveal or anything like that, but it's all good stuff. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. I'm always interested to hear what you guys have to. A lot of smart people chime in, and I learn something new every time, every video from a comment. Thanks for watching. I'll be sure to make more videos breaking down the Investor Day presentation material and other items that Peter and the team spoke about during the presentation. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.